Nowadays, playing an original looking or original playing game ends up being few and far between, as we've seen so many different styles of games, especially when it comes to indie developed games. But there's a brand new artistic platformer called Bound that combines platforming with the art of ribbon gymnastics. But does this ribbon dancing end up dancing its way into gamers' hearts, or does the ribbon fall apart and end up in tatters? Bound is one of the more uniquely playing platformers I've played in recent years. Indie games always have that opportunity to experiment much more than mainstream games, and that comes through with Bound. The game has two settings: the real-world setting, where you're controlling a young pregnant girl who's scrolling along the beach. There's a house in the distance that you slowly start to make your way to, but you're not really given any story or reason for why you're doing that. She has a journal in her hand, and the journal and the pages within it work as the game's levels. Once you're transported into the pages of the book, you're taken into a fantastic, artistic dream world. In this world, you're playing as a young girl who is clearly skilled in ballet, as she's able to dance and maneuver her way around the various obstacles. Pulling off some great maneuvers, and just the whole rhythm of her movement is something that I hadn't seen really in previous games. In this fantasy world, you're tasked by your mother in order to stop this rampaging evil creature, which in many ways is similar to your mother in appearance. And as you get farther in, without spoiling anything, of course everything in this fantasy world ends up being a metaphor for something in the real world. And I don't want to go too much more into that, because that's one of the better aspects of Bound. As you complete levels, more of the picture and the metaphor becomes clear to you. While you do play briefly in the real world, basically moving the girl down the beach slowly, every few steps she basically stops to look at the book again, in which case you'll get to select another page in the book. You can actually complete the levels in any order, so that's an added plus to everything, but you must complete every page until eventually you get to the end of the game. In the fantasy world, you're going to be platforming and dancing your way around the various obstacles, rolling past or doing the various different ballet and ribbon gymnastics in order to knock enemies off of you as they try to swarm you or grab hold of you, trying to stop your progress. While in some ways platforming is a pretty typical standard fare, it's the way that it's presented with all kinds of different styles of platforms and a very artistic look to everything. You'll see a lot of influence from a lot of different artists. Of course, immediately MC Escher came to mind, just with the various styles of stairs and the way they turn and twist and lead into other staircases, and you're upside down on one screen and then right side up on the next by going through doorways. The fantasy world not only is artistic, it's beautiful to look at, with a nice musical score that goes along and accompanies you through the various levels. Though honestly, the real world graphical stylings, at least for the main character, really didn't do anything for me, and honestly were a bit poor, considering just how good I thought everything ended up looking when you're in that fantasy world. There's no real combat of any kind, as you will dance and use your ribbons to knock away anything that kinda swarms on you. And missing platforms, you will end up falling and be reset, but you don't lose really any progress whatsoever if you end up missing platforms. The game defaultly has an edge guard on, which I definitely recommend if you want to get through the game without pulling your hair out, because sometimes it really is hard to judge how close you are to an edge or how far you're going to need to make a jump because of various different camera angles. The game uses lots of different camera angles and can switch on the drop of a hat, so that you may not end up being able to tell exactly how far you need to go down a platform or exactly how you're gonna balance on the next balance beam segment. To make it more challenging, you can turn off that edge guard, but let me just tell you, you're probably going to end up falling a lot more than you were with the edge guard on. You can run with the character by holding down L2 to speed up things, but of course you're going to want to let go of that sometimes when making certain jumps, as some jumps will be a lot shorter. There are plenty of times, unfortunately, when I ended up clearly landing on a platform and ended up going through it, or something ended up looking where I needed to go next. I jumped to it, but I ended up falling and then resetting, and then all of a sudden, then the next time I tried it, it worked, or it would end up being somewhere completely different and not jumping to that platform where I ended up needing to go, but there's no no real guidance or line that you need to kind of follow. So there is a little bit of exploration here and there, but it ended up being more frustrating than actual enjoyment when it came to the very, very few times that I didn't know exactly where to go, or when I ended up falling through a platform or going through a wall. Due to being no combat in the game, there's no boss encounters either. You will encounter the giant creature that you're kind of going after, as it's seen as the evil entity of this world, but mostly all it'll end up doing is either seeing you in a cutscene, or will end up roaring at you, causing you to shake for a few seconds, but you can just dance your way out of it and kind of block out the sound and be able to skip on through and keep moving and progressing, even with the giant creature roaring at you from behind. This is definitely a platformer that's much more about enjoying the scenery and the story that ends up telling. There is no health to worry about, no lives, and no combat with enemies. For the most part, you're just going to be platforming your way from section to section to see where the story ends up leading next. But unfortunately, because of that, it ends up being a relatively short experience. It's a beautiful looking game, and I love a game that takes this kind of artistic approach to everything and does something a little bit different than I haven't seen before. But it took me less than an hour and a half in order to complete the game for my first playthrough. The game does encourage multiple playthroughs, as you will unlock a speedrun mode after you complete the game for the first time. Once you start the speedrun mode, the clock will be on the side for the entire length, and you'll also have a timer for each of the levels as you're progressing through. There's also collectible shards to find in each of the levels, and you'll have the percentage of how many shards you've collected on the left side of the screen while you're in speedrun mode. Though during the normal gameplay, it doesn't end up telling you how many more shards that you end up needing in that particular stage. The game is available for the PlayStation 4 for $19.99, and for trophy hunters it does have a full trophy list with a platinum included, and it does encourage those multiple playthroughs, including beating the game without ever falling off or missing one of your jumps, as well as some really ridiculously fast speedruns that you're going to have to do in order to get those trophies. Like I said, the game is beautiful. I like a lot of the accompaniment when it comes to the music, and I like the overall artistic style that they went with, and the whole metaphor and the story for what's being told is nice. I've seen some other games that have done similar with its storytelling, so it wasn't something necessarily groundbreaking to me, but it was still very well done for what it was. The problem is, it's a very short game and very short experience for the price point that you're going to end up paying. In the end, though, I'm going to be giving Bound a 5 out of 10. It's a very enjoyable yet easy platformer because there is no real penalties for falling off ledges and dying, but I could definitely see those who may get into the speedrunning or want to try to beat the game without falling off. You'll find a challenge that maybe end up worth your money. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoy.